Static breaks through a cracked dashboard speaker. Dust covers the road ahead, and somewhere beyond the next rise, a border marker has fallen. Nothing about Ravikhar feels still anymore. Thank you for being here, and if you enjoy the story, consider subscribing. Now, let the road carry us in. The first warning came through Dane Whitlock's cracked dashboard speaker as a burst of static and one hard word. Movement. He slapped the side of the speaker with 2 fingers. The signal cleared just enough for Marlowe Keene's voice to crawl through the dust. Dane, if you can hear me, the North crews are rolling toward the marker. South crews too. They both think the other side moved it last night. I have families trying to get out, armed idiots trying to get in, and one traveling judge who apparently thinks a border dispute is a nice place to take measurements. Tell me you are close. Dane looked through the windshield at the bronze haze swallowing the road. The plains of Ravikhar stretched ahead in hard shelves of gray stone and rust-colored dust. Somewhere beyond the next rise, a planetary boundary marker the height of a grain tower was supposed to stand upright in the bedrock. If Marlowe's voice was that tight, it probably did not stand upright anymore. I'm close, Dane said. Define nice place. The kind where people bring rifles to argue with dirt. That is most of the shatter line. Seryn Vaal sat beside him with one hand braced on the cabin bar, the other holding a sealed case against her knees. She had not flinched when the rescue truck hit the last rut hard enough to rattle the roof lights. Her pale silver eyes stayed on the rolling map projected over her wrist plate, even though the map had already lied to them 3 times. Ask your friend if the marker is still accessible, she said. Dane pressed the transmit switch. Marlowe, is the marker accessible? For sane people? No. For you? Still no, but that never stopped you. He says yes, Dane told Seryn. She turned her head. Her features were fine-boned and calm in a way that made most people feel underdressed. The faint sensory ridges along her temples were hidden beneath dark blue hair, pulled tight at the back of her neck. That is not what he said. It was the useful version. I was told Earth guides were practical. I did not realize practical meant selectively honest. Dane downshifted as the truck climbed over a shelf of fractured stone. Selective honesty is how we keep from boring each other to death. You hired me to get you there before the shooting starts. I'm doing that. I hired you to get me there with an intact chain of evidence. If you change routes without logging the reason, any order I issue can be challenged. He nodded at the map on her wrist. Your official route goes through a sink field that opened after dawn. The map says stable ground. The map is optimistic. I try not to die by optimism. Seryn glanced ahead. Dust curled across the road in thin metallic sheets. The truck's tires hummed over stone, then dropped suddenly. Dane caught the skid with a small turn of the wheel, calm as if the ground had merely asked a question. That was not on any survey, she said. It was in the dust. Dust told you there was a hollow under the road. Dust, tire marks, and the fact that no animal with sense crossed that stretch. I trust animals with sense. People with guns, less so. The faintest curve touched her mouth. It vanished before he could decide if it was a smile. The speaker burst again. Dane, Ferry. Tabak's people are on the North Ridge. Ara's convoy is coming from the South Cut. Blackline is not here yet, which is the only good news. Dane frowned. Blackline should be hours away unless somebody called them before the accident. That is what I'm trying not to think about. Seryn looked up from her wrist plate. Blackline Guard is the private security contractor attached to Asteron Works. I know who they are. Your tone suggests you dislike them. My tone is polite. My brakes dislike them. My tires dislike them. A few of my ribs have strong opinions too. She studied him for a moment. You've been injured by them? Not officially. Officially, I fell down a slope while resisting helpful supervision. The truck crested the rise before she could answer. The boundary marker was not standing. It leaned across the road like the broken spine of some buried machine, its black surface scraped raw where the base had ripped free of the stone. A civilian hauler lay half over a fresh split in the ground, rear wheels hanging over a dark seam that breathed heat. People crowded around it, shouting through the dust. On the North Ridge, Tavik Wren's armed crews had taken positions behind water tanks bolted to sled frames. To the south, Vale's people were arriving in battered carriers, weapons low but visible. Dane did not slow. "Brace," he said. Seryn grabbed the bar as the truck slid off the road and bounced into a trough of mineral mud. Heat flashed across the windshield. Dane steered around a bubbling vent, slammed the truck sideways against a rock shelf, and threw the parking brake. He was out before the engine stopped shaking. "Stay behind the truck until I see the ground," he called. Seryn stepped out after him, seal case in hand. "I need the marker base. You need not to be cut in half by a crack that opened 5 minutes ago. Then we both need to be fast." The hauler slipped another foot. A woman inside screamed. Dane ran to the rear winch, clipped the cable to the truck frame, and tossed the hook toward two men frozen near the hauler. "Loop it through the axle, not the bumper," he shouted. "The bumper already quit. Learn from it." One of the men stared at him. Dane pointed. "Axle. Big metal bar. Looks like it wants a job." The man moved. Seryn went the other way, toward the fallen marker. Dane cursed under his breath and kept moving. He could not drag the hauler and drag the judge back at the same time. The ground gave a deep, slow knock under his boots. Not a crack, not a slide, a pulse. Seryn felt it too. She stopped with one hand hovering over the marker base. The ridges near her temples darkened, and her expression tightened. "Seryn," Dane warned. "The base was not cut," she said. "It was pulled." "Great. Write it down after we save the people in the falling box." She crouched and snapped 3 seal tabs from her case onto the exposed root of the marker. Each tab flashed blue, then white, locking a legal record. A rifle crack from a north ridge. The shot hit stone several yards away, more warning than aim, but it turned every shout into panic. Dane lunged for the winch controls. "Everybody down. Both sides, weapons low, or I start insulting your mothers by name. I know most of them." Tavik Wren's voice carried through the haze. They moved the marker. We saw it leaning at sunrise. From the south, Vale shouted back, "Your people blocked our survey crews. Do not pretend innocence now." The hauler dropped again. Dane hit the winch. The cable drew tight with a metal groan. The truck slid backward, tires scraping stone. He jumped into the cab, locked the rear anchors, and fed power from the emergency cell. The winch screamed. Slowly, the hauler dragged away from the seam. A small boy tumbled from the side door into a man's arms. Dane looked away only long enough to confirm the living were out. Then he saw Seryn standing between a marker and the 2 armed lines. She had removed a white seal wand from the case. Her voice, amplified by the wand, cut through the dust without becoming loud. "By authority of border emergency law, this marker is under temporary judicial freeze. No party will advance, remove material, or alter the site until the living are clear and the record is sealed." A man from Tavik's crew lifted his rifle. Dane moved before thought caught up. He stepped into the line of fire, wrench in hand, and pointed at the man. "Put that down, Rel. You could not hit a fuel drum from 10 feet last winter, and I am much prettier than a fuel drum." The man hesitated. Several people around him recognized Dane and shouted for him to move. He did not. Seryn did not either. The marker gave a long, low moan. A second pulse ran through the ground. Dane felt it through his boots and teeth. Seryn's face went pale. She pressed 2 fingers to her temple, and a thin line of dark blood appeared just below the ridge. "Not surface collapse," she said, almost to herself. Repeating interval. "Deep source." Dane grabbed her elbow as the ground under her left foot broke. He pulled her back hard, and the seam swallowed the place where she had stood. "When you argue with a planet," he said, breathing hard, "pick a spot with a railing." She leaned against the truck for half a second, eyes closed. "Your advice is inelegant, but timely." The rumble faded. In its place came the low whine of engines. Blackline guard vehicles rolled out of the dust in a neat dark line, too neat for a force responding to a surprise disaster. Their lead carrier stopped near the fallen marker. Karasdavin stepped down in a gray field coat with a polished sidearm and a smile built for reports. "Judge Vaal," he called. "This site is no longer safe. Asteron Works offers emergency stabilization and crowd control." Dane watched the guards spread out. They knew where not to step. That was the first bad sign. Seryn straightened. Your offer is noted. Is not accepted. With respect, you are outside secure jurisdiction. With equal respect, Commander Davin, this is now a sealed judicial site. Karras's eyes flicked to the seal tabs on the marker base. His smile did not move, but something behind it hardened. Dane stepped close enough to Seryn to speak low. They got here fast. Too fast, she said. Your legal words for that. Suspicious. Good word. Short. I like it. She lifted her wrist plate and compared the black line survey overlay with her fresh record. Dane saw the lines shift, clean and even, as if the world had been nudged sideways by a careful hand. Their map is not random, she said. It is offset from mine by a consistent displacement. Meaning the marker may be in two legal positions depending on when the land was measured. Another pulse rolled under them, weaker but clear. This time Dane felt the truck's frame answer like a plucked wire. Karras tried a softer approach while his guards kept spreading. He asked for witnesses, but only from the side of the crowd closest to his vehicles. Seryn noticed the pattern and moved first to the families who had been trapped in the hauler. She took short statements while Dane checked the winch cable and pretended not to watch her. She did not lead them. She did not make the frightened woman say what would help her order. She asked where the ground had moved, what they had heard before the marker fell, and whether anyone had touched the base. A girl with dust on. Her cheeks pointed to the marker and said the stone had hummed before it leaned. Tavik's men shouted that she had been scared and confused. Ara's crew shouted back that children did not invent humming rocks. The argument almost caught fire again until Dane climbed onto the truck hood and held up the snapped hook from the hauler's bumper. This hook failed because metal gets tired, he said. People get tired too. So before anyone asks a scared kid to carry your whole war on her back, try carrying this hook for 10 seconds. It is lighter. The girl's mother began to cry, quiet and angry. Seryn sealed the statement anyway. Her eyes met Dane's for a brief moment. There was approval there, but also surprise, as if she had not expected his jokes to protect anything fragile. Blackline sent a small survey drone toward the marker base. Seryn stepped in front of it and raised her seal wand. The drone stopped inches from her face. This site is frozen, she said. Karras's smile stayed pleasant. The drone is only scanning for safety hazards. Then it can be safe at a distance. Dane came to stand beside her, wrench still in his hand. The judge is being polite. My wrench has fewer manners. Karras called the drone back, but the exchange changed the air. Tavik and Ara's people saw that Blackline was not merely helping. They saw someone with power being told no, and they saw that no backed by both a seal and a man covered in rescue dust. Seryn's mouth tightened. I need to see Greywater Reach. Dane looked toward the north and south ridges. People were still shouting. Children were crying. Blackline guards were closing the circle one patient step at a time. Of course you do, he said, because the one thing this Dane needed was a field trip. Can you get me there? Yes. Can you do it without violating your license? He looked at the fallen marker, the armed crews, the hauler still smoking beside the seam, and Karras Davin's men moving like they already owned the disaster. Probably not, Dane said. Seryn met his eyes. She did not ask him to choose. That made the choice harder. Dane opened the truck door. Get in. And if anyone asks, I was kidnapped by due process. For the first time, she smiled enough that he could not pretend he had imagined it. They left the marker behind under Seryn's seal, but the ground kept knocking beneath them as if something deep under Ravikhar had begun counting down. Dane took the old cattle road west, though there were no cattle on Ravikhar and the road had not been official in 12 years. The truck crawled between stone fins while dust scraped the windows. Behind them, the shatter line disappeared into a brown wall. Seryn sat with her seal case open, checking the marker data against 3 maps. Her hand was steady, but the blood near her temple had dried in a thin line. Dane noticed she had not wiped it away. You going to tell me what that was? He asked. A physiological response. That clears it right up. She looked at him. My species can detect low-frequency vibration through sensory structures in the skull and skin. It is useful for assessing unstable terrain. Useful looked painful. It can be. Strong artificial pulses can overload the structures. Metal interference makes it worse. And you forgot to mention that before walking onto a moving marker because you did not mention that your official route was fiction until you drove off it. Dane gave a small laugh despite himself. Fair. I will trade one secret for one secret. That was not a secret. It was a limitation. Out here, limitations get people killed when they are kept secret. She closed the case. Then we should both improve. The words landed heavier than her tone. Dane turned down a slope that looked like solid stone until the truck's nose dipped and the rear wheels slid. He fed power carefully and let the tires climb the side of the rut. Seryn braced one hand against the dash. This road is marked impassable. It is impassable if you believe the center line still exists. Does it? No. That is why I am not driving on it. They reached Greywater Reach near dusk. The place had once been a broad basin of shallow channels and low farms, with water shining between gray reeds. Now the main channel bent away from its old cut and vanished into a stretch of dead flats that steamed pale green. On the north side, wells stood dry beside empty storage tanks. On the south side, shelters had been flooded with mineral water that left crusted white lines on fabric and skin. Dane stopped near Marlowe's rescue rig. Marlowe was short, broad, and sun-darkened, with a voice that always sounded like it had survived bad weather first. He handed Dane a fuel can before saying hello. You look terrible. I brought a judge through a moving road. Marlowe. Compliment my posture. Marlowe glanced at Seryn. Judge Vaal. Welcome to the part of Ravikhar everyone in the capital calls complicated when they mean ignored. I need samples from both channels, Seryn said. Old and new. I also need both representatives here. They're already here, unfortunately. Tavik Wren arrived first, walking with a cane that did not slow him. He had a lined face, a field coat patched at both elbows, and the brittle patience of a man who had buried too many neighbors. Vaal came from the opposite side with 2 aides and wet boots stained white by mineral runoff. She was younger than Tavik, but no less tired. My people have worked these wells for 30 years, Tavik said before Seryn could speak. The old marker gave us the northern channels. Now her people arrive with new papers, and the water leaves us the same week. Ara's jaw tightened. My people were moved from the South Flats by legal order. We were assigned access to Greywater Reach. We did not poison our own shelters. Then why is the water on your side? Because it moved, not because we stole it. Dane stepped between 2 men who had started drifting too close with rifles. Everybody breathe. If you are thirsty, I recommend not shooting the people standing next to the only judge who can keep your wells from becoming corporate property. Tavik glared at him. Whose side are you on, Whitlock? The side where nobody shoots a water pipe. It is a lonely side, but the plumbing is better. Seryn knelt by the old channel. She placed a seal tab in the dry bed, then crossed to the new toxic flow. Dane followed, watching for soft patches. The mud steamed around her boots. This is not diverted surface water, she said. The mineral load is too high. Could be from a deep pocket, Dane said. But pockets do not move an entire channel overnight. No, she said. They do not. Ara held out a document plate. Our grant is real. Tavik lifted his own. Our residence claim is older. Seryn scanned both. Her expression did not change, but Dane saw the problem in the stillness of her hands. Both are valid, she said. A low, angry sound moved through the crowd. That is impossible, Tavik said. It should be, Seryn replied. But each record refers to a different survey state. Dane looked toward the channel, bending away into the dead flats. So the law drew lines on land that would not hold still. Or someone made it stop holding still after the lines were drawn. A group of Tavik's younger people began rolling stones toward the new channel, ready to block it. Ara's aides moved to stop them. Dane jogged over, planted himself in front of the first sled, and leaned both hands on the stone load. Bad plan. A young man snarled, move. No, you block that flow, pressure backs under the flats. Then the ground opens, the poison spreads, and everyone gets to be wrong together. You do not know that. Dane pointed to the mud around the channel. See the bubbles? They come in pairs. Surface flow does not breathe in pairs. Under pressure does. The young man hesitated. Behind them, Seryn stepped toward Ara. I need a sample from your flooded shelters. You will use it to say we contaminated the water, Ara said. I will use it to determine whether the contamination came from below. If you refuse, the only record left will be accusation. Ara looked at her people, then at the wet stains on her own boots. She nodded once. Marlowe came to Dane's side while the samples were taken. People are saying you brought her to make the old claims disappear. People say many things when thirsty. They are also saying Blackline has your old survey routes. Dane did not answer. Marlowe's voice dropped. You sold access lines to Asteron last year. To a licensed safety survey. That is what they called it. Dane looked away toward the flats. Seryn, kneeling by a buried water marker, glanced up just long enough to see his silence. Marlowe reached into his rig and pulled out a squat gray power unit with handles welded on both sides. Take this. Dane stared at it. That thing belongs in a museum for equipment that died unpopular. It still holds a steady load. It weighs more than my truck. Good. Harder to steal. Seryn approached, sealing a sample vial. Old equipment often survives because it was built before people learned how to make failure profitable. Dane looked at her. Then he laughed once, real and surprised. Judge, that is the meanest thing I have heard you say. I approve. It was not meant as humor. That makes it better. They loaded the power unit into the truck. Seryn returned to the buried water marker. She took a breath and placed her bare palm against the mud. The ridges near her temples darkened again. Dane crouched nearby, watching the mud bubbles. Do not overdo it, he said. I need to know if the pressure is natural. You bleeding into the dirt is not part of the test. Her eyes half closed. The deep pressure layer is rising from below. Repeating interval. Same pattern as the marker. Her knees buckled. Dane caught her before she touched the steaming mud. She was lighter than he expected, but all tension, like a wire drawn too tight. Enough, he said. Not yet. Yes, yet. That is a rescue term. Means the person doing the rescuing has decided you are done being foolish. She blinked hard, irritated and faint. You have no authority over my body. The words hit him clean. He released his grip at once, but kept one hand open beside her in case she fell. You are right, he said, but I would appreciate it if your body stayed out of boiling mud. She looked at his hand, then took it. Not because she had to, because she chose to stand with help. I should have told you the cost sooner, she said. I should have told you about the routes. Then we are both late. Common frontier condition. They did not leave Greywater Reach immediately. Marlowe forced Dane to take 20 minutes to patch the truck's cooling line, because the boulder field ahead would punish any leak. The pause became its own kind of test. Tabak's people watched from the dry well road. Ara's people watched from the flooded shelter line. Blackline watched from the checkpoint at the basin mouth, close enough to remind everyone who had vehicles with armor and who had tarps. Seryn used the pause to walk the old channel with 2 children from Tabak's side and 1 elderly woman from Ara's. She asked them to show her where the water used to sing under the stones. Dane heard the question and almost teased her for making water sound like a witness. But then he saw the old woman kneel and touch a dry stone as if it were a lost animal. Seryn listened without rushing. She marked the place, not because the memory was enough for law, but because memory told her where to search for physical proof. Dane tightened a clamp under the hood until his knuckles ached. When Seryn returned, she handed him a clean cloth without comment. He took it. You ask witnesses like a rescue worker checks wreckage, he said. Meaning, you look for what is still holding. She considered that. And you joke like someone checking for consciousness. That is because most people would rather laugh than admit they are terrified. Including you? He wiped his hands. Especially me. I am extremely committed to morale. Your morale makes loud engine noises. That is my truck. Different patient. The small exchange sat between them longer than it should have. It did not soften the emergency, but it made the cab feel less like a contract space when they climbed back in. Before she could answer, every public screen in Greywater Reach flashed red. A Blackline emergency alert rolled across them, declaring an unrest risk, activating a private security corridor and restricting unauthorized vehicles. Dane's truck chirped. The dash showed his guide license suspended for hazardous activity pending review, and his fuel authorization was denied. He stared at the notice. That was quick. Seryn's wrist plate showed a sealed access denial on her own route permissions. They are not waiting for law. They are making the facts law will have to chase. Dane looked toward the western ridge, where the old survey station lay beyond dead road and broken stone. There's a place near the low rift, he said. Old station. I took engineers there once. If this started with a survey, there may be something left. You are only telling me now. I was hoping the past would stay polite. It has not. Marlowe overheard and swore softly. That road is bad after dark. Everything is bad after dark, Dane said. Some things are just honest about it. Seryn sealed the last sample case and stood. Then we go now. Dane looked at the dry wells, the poisoned shelters, the people watching one another with fear hardening into blame. He had spent years learning how to stay neutral in places where neutrality kept him alive. Now neutrality looked like a road washed out behind him. Marlowe, he said, start moving the families farthest from the ridge. Quietly if you can. Loudly if you have to. And you. Dane climbed into the truck. I'm taking the judge to visit an old mistake. The road to the survey station had become a rumor. A black-line checkpoint waited where the old service road crossed a dry spillway. Dane saw it before the guard saw him, because their lights were aimed at the official track, not the drainage shelf above it. He killed the engine and let the truck roll in neutral behind a line of stone teeth. Seryn leaned close to the side window. Can we go around? Around is a generous word. What is the ungenerous word? Falling. The checkpoint scanned the lower road with a beam that would tag their license and broadcast their location. Dane reached under the dash and pulled a fuse. The truck's guide beacon went dark. Seryn's eyes narrowed. That is illegal. So, is trapping a judicial officer in a disaster zone. I'm trying to keep up. If your beacon is off and we are lost, rescue cannot find us. If the beacon is on, Black Line finds us first. Rescue can have second place. He eased the truck along the shelf with the engine off, using gravity and brake taps. Twice the tires slipped sideways. Seryn stayed silent until the rear wheel scraped a loose edge and stones clattered down. A guard below turned toward the sound. Dane grabbed a flare from the console, snapped it cold, and threw it in the opposite direction. It sparked against a far rock. The guards moved toward it. You carry dead. Flares as decoys. Seryn whispered. I carry everything as something else. Frontier rule. When they cleared the checkpoint, Dane restarted the engine with one short cough and drove into darker terrain. Seryn did not approve aloud, but she logged the reason for the beacon cut into her sealed record. Dane saw the motion. Are you documenting my crimes? I am documenting necessity. That is a friendlier word. It is not friendship. No, but it is a better charge. Dane drove without headlights for the first mile, using the pale glow of mineral crust and the darker lines where cracks cut the flats. Behind them, Greywater Reach shrank into a scatter of work lights. Ahead, the land rose into broken plates that shifted against one another with patient force. Seryn kept one hand near the dash, not touching, feeling the vibration through air and frame. The pulses are closer together. How close? Close enough that I dislike your speed. That is hurtful. My speed has a family. Your speed is an orphan raised by bad judgment. Danelaft. It loosened something between them. Not enough to erase the secrets, but enough to keep them breathing. The truck climbed a stone ribbon between two sink fields. Halfway across, Seryn snapped, stop. Dane braked. The front tires stopped inches from a surface that looked exactly like the ground behind it. Back, she said. He backed slowly. The stone ahead settled without a sound, then folded inward and vanished into black dust. Dane looked at her. I was going to stop there. No, you were not. I was thinking about it. Your thoughts were late. Common Earth condition. This time she smiled first. They crossed by angling up a ridge Dane would never have chosen from a map. Seryn counted the pulses under her breath. Dane watched dust drift across stone, watched pebbles roll against gravity, Watch for the little lies that told him the bigger truth. Twice he turned because she said the ground was about to shear. Once she stayed silent and trusted him when he drove into what looked like a dead end, but opened into a narrow cut. When the old survey station appeared, it was half buried under a slide. Its beacon tower leaned against a basalt wall. The Astron Works logo had been scratched from the door, but not well enough. Dane shut off the truck. We go in, copy what we can, leave before Blackline notices. They already noticed, Seryn said. A red light blinked on the door panel. That could be old. It is transmitting. I was enjoying optimism for a second. Inside, the station smelled of dust, hot wiring, and old panic. Dane pried open a storage locker and found 2 lamps, a coil of cable, and a pressure tank with half a charge. Seryn moved to the data wall. Most of the memory slots were empty. One slot still held a cracked data strip with a warning seal. She inserted it into her wrist plate. Lines of corrupted data crawled across the projection. Deep Anchor Project, she read. Survey authorization limited to shallow stability assessment. No extraction. No deep resonance. Sounds comforting. It is not. The later entries reference trust depth far beyond the authorization. Dane leaned closer. Who signed off? Seryn's face went very still. That was enough. Seryn. A preliminary stability note used my judicial authorization code. Used how? I reviewed central data 2 years ago. I allowed a limited survey with restrictions. Astron Works appears to have cited that review as legal basis for deeper work. The room felt smaller. Dane thought of the dry wells, the fallen marker, the old route he had sold as safe passage. You open the door, he said. Her eyes lifted to his. A crack in it. They forced it wider. People are losing homes through that crack. She absorbed the blow without looking away. Yes. No defense. No palischil. It made anger harder to hold, and somehow that made him angrier. Before he could speak, the station lights cut out. Drone rotors whispered beyond the walls. Dane killed his lamp. Down. The first Blackline drone came through the roof vent in a glitter of broken mesh. It swept the room with a stun beam. Dane rolled behind a console, threw a wrench, and knocked the drone into the data wall. Sparks showered. Seryn moved fast to the emergency panel. Doors are locked from outside. I noticed. The station still has a personnel safety code. If I can assert a judicial override with an active life sign, the doors must open. Good. Do that. It requires 30 seconds. Another drone cut through the side window. Dane grabbed the old pressure tank. I can make 30 seconds extremely unpleasant for everyone. He kicked the tank valve open and rolled it across the floor. The drone tracked movement. Dane fired a flare into the gas stream. The blast was small, bright, and loud enough to make the whole station ring. The drone slammed into a wall. 20, Seryn said. Blackline guards hit the outer door with a breach tool. Dane hooked the coil cable to a ceiling brace and yanked an equipment rack across the doorway. Tell your legal system to hurry. It dislikes being rushed. So do I. We are both adapting. The door buckled. Seryn pressed her palm to the panel. Her wrist seal flashed white. Emergency personnel exit recognized, the station said in a broken voice. A floor hatch opened behind Dane. Of course there's a floor hatch, he said. Buildings love drama. Seryn snatched the cracked data strip. Dane grabbed her seal case and dropped into the hatch after her. They slid down a maintenance chute and landed hard in a lower tunnel. Above them, boots crashed into the station. Dane pulled the hatch shut. Run. They ran bent double through the tunnel. Seryn stumbled once. Dane reached for her, then stopped short. She saw the motion, saw him remember what she had said at the mud channel, and took his hand herself. Now, she said, you may assist. Glad to have the permit. They emerged behind the station, tumbled down a gravel slope, and reached the truck as guards shouted above. Dane started the engine. It coughed, caught, then shrieked as he forced it over broken rock. A shot hit the rear panel. Another shattered the left mirror. They are aiming low, Seryn said. They want the truck, not our bodies. Very considerate. The rear transmission light turned amber, then read, Danegremeist, less considerate. They escaped into a maze of basalt teeth. The truck limped, losing power in every third turn. Dane finally pulled into a dry drainage cut and shut it down. For a while they listened to the engine tick and distant drones searched the wrong valley. Seryn held the cracked data strip in both hands. I should have told you immediately. Yes, I was ashamed. That does not help the people at Greywater. No, it only explains the delay. He looked at her then. Dust streaked her face. Blood had dried again at the edge of one sensory ridge. She looked less like a judge carved out of law and more like someone standing in the wreckage of her own certainty. I sold those routes, he said. The access lines Marlowe mentioned. Asteron said it was a safety survey. I checked the licenses. They were real. I did not check what they could become. Seryn sat back against the truck. Then we both trusted official limits. Mine had tire tracks. Yours had seals. Both were used. The silence after that was not comfortable, but it was honest. The crack strip held one intact location tag. It pointed them toward a maintenance shelter near the low rift. The tag repeated one name. Howland Forik. Dane knew the shelter. He also knew no one would hide there unless every better option had been burned away. They spent part of the night in a dry culvert when the truck's damaged transmission overheated. The culvert was too low to stand in and too narrow for comfort, but it hid them from the search lights combing the ridge above. Dane opened the side panel of the truck and worked by the glow of a covered lamp. Seryn sat on the gravel with the sample case between her boots, listening to the distant pulses through the earth. You should sleep, Dane said without looking up. So should you. I am communing with a gearbox. Very restful. It sounds hostile. Most meaningful relationships do. She was quiet long enough that he glanced back. Her face had tightened again, not from humor, but from the pressure beneath the ground. Another pulse? Smaller, she said. Not harmless. There is a difference. Dane returned to the gearbox. Out here, harmless is usually what dangerous wears when it wants to ride. That sounds like something experience taught you badly. Most experience teaches badly. That is how you remember it. Seryn looked toward the culvert mouth, where dust drifted. Silver under the hidden moon. When I reviewed the old stability data, I thought caution in the wording would protect people. Limited survey. No extraction. No deep resonance. I believed restrictions were walls. Deemed to me turned aboard. They are walls if the people reading them respect walls. And if they do not, then you need someone near the wall with a hammer. She looked back at him. Is that your legal philosophy? My legal philosophy is mostly not getting arrested. It has had mixed results. This time her laugh was small but real. It faded into something gentler. I did not want my guilt to make me reckless. Good. Reckless is my department. You can apply for a guest pass later. I am serious, Dane. He set down the tool. So, am I? Guilt is a bad driver, but it can point at the road you have been avoiding. After that, hands on the wheel. She considered the words as if they were evidence. That is almost wise. Almost is my best category. The gearbox finally settled into place with a tired clunk. Dane closed the panel, and for a few quiet seconds neither of them moved. There was attraction in the silence, but also the knowledge that attraction was not enough to make the next day survivable. What mattered more was that each had seen the other's fear and had not used it. They reached it near dawn, after 2 hours of walking beside the limping truck to spare the transmission. Halen Vorik opened the hatch with a shock tool in one shaking hand and fear in both eyes. No, he said when he saw Seryn's seal case. No cohorts, no guards, no asteron. I am done. People will die in the next cycle, Seryn said. People already died. Then help stop the next ones. Halen laughed once, thin and broken. You cannot stop Deep Anchor. Not from a shelter. Not with a judge and a guide. Dane stepped forward. The old route through the South Maintenance Cut. I brought you there, didn't I? Halen stared at him. Recognition arrived, followed by guilt. You were the guide. I was told shallow sensors. At first, yes. Then deeper rigs came through under security cover. By then we were told the court had cleared the stability issue. Seryn closed her eyes for 1 second. Only one. What happens next? She asked. Halen looked between them. The largest pull cycle starts tonight. It will draw the or shelf under the low rift. The basin floor will settle. The water vein at gray water will lock into the dead flats. If people are in the rift, they will not get out. Can it be stopped? Dane asked. Locked, not stopped. There's a phase change before the pull. You need the core data, a live engineer code, a judge-level safety override, and external power. Asteron cut the public safety grid. Dane thought of the ugly gray power unit in his truck. How much power? Halen told him. Danelaft softly. Seryn looked at him. That is good. No, that is terrible. But I know a terrible box that might do it. Halen shook his head. If we use the core data to lock the system, it will corrupt. You will lose most of the proof. Seryn's hand tightened on the seal case. The clean case. The one meant for a clean record. Dane understood before she spoke. If she preserved the data, she could expose Asteron later. Maybe, if there was a later, if gray waters survived that long. Seryn opened her eyes. Then we had better make the living proof difficult to ignore. Before they left Halen's shelter, the old engineer made them look at the model he had built from scraps on the table. It was crude. 3 bent nails stood for anchor trusses. A cracked cup stood for the anchor basin. A blue wire marked the water vein, and 2 stones marked the communities at Greywater Reach. When he pulled the nails with a magnet under the table, the blue wire slid away from both stones. This is not terraforming, he said. Terraforming stabilizes first. Deep anchor cheats. It grips a mineral shelf and drags the stress field upward. The ore comes closer to the surface, yes, but everything tied to that stress field moves with it. Water, soft layers, old fault seams. Markers if their roots are deep enough. Seryn touched the blue wire. Why did the early data show stability? Because we measure between pulls. The ground rests between pulses. If you only test when a patient is not coughing, you can claim the lungs are fine. Dane looked at the nails. And tonight's pull. Halen drew the magnet hard. The wires snapped out from between both stones. Tonight they stop pretending it is a survey. They take the shelf. After that, Asteron can say the land is too damaged for civilian settlement and too valuable to abandon. Convenient, Dane said. Convenient is an engineered product, Seryn replied. The model made the danger simple enough for Dane to hate it cleanly. It also explained why no single map had lied completely. Every survey had been a photograph of a moving wound. The day of the pull cycle began with false alarms. Every screen in Tavik's northern camp flashed a warning that Ara's people were moving to seize the final marker at the low rift. Every receiver in Ara's southern camp carried a message that Tavik had armed a crew to break the last temporary waterline. The messages used local emergency codes. They sounded official. They were lies timed with care. Marlowe caught the pattern first and relayed it to Dane while shoving fuel cells into the rescue truck. They are hurting them, Marlowe said. Both sides to the rift. Dane stood beside his own damaged truck, staring at a rough map Halen had drawn in dust. The anchor basin lay under the ridge east of the low rift. The power relay sat on the far side of the stone bridge that crossed the rift's upper cut. The same bridge was the only way his truck could retreat once the lower road began to fail. Karis wants them standing on the trap when it opens, Dane said. Seryn checked the core module Halen had carried inside a padded tool case. Her face was pale from lack of sleep, but steady. If the communities fire on each other, Blackline can declare civil collapse and take control. If the ground kills them during the clash, Asteron calls it an unfortunate natural event. I hate efficient villains. He is not a villain in his own report, Seryn said. He is a stabilizing contractor. I hate those worse. The plan split because the danger split. They want to go straight to the low rift and drag Tavik and Ara's people back. Seryn needed to reach the anchor basin before the phase window. For a few sharp minutes they argued in the shelter doorway, not because they did not trust each other, but because each saw a different group of people dying first. If I do not reach the basin, Seryn said, all evacuation only buys them a few hours. If I do not reach the rift, there may be no one left to save when you lock it. Halen watched them with miserable eyes. Marlowe finally barked. Then stop trying to be in 2 places. Be useful in one each. Dane and Seryn looked at each other. It was the obvious answer. It was also the one neither wanted. Seryn held out the seal case. I will take Halen through the maintenance cut. I can open the safety doors if his code still works. Black Line will be waiting. Then I will be polite with the doors and impolite with the law. Dane almost smiled. Careful. That sounded like me. I am choosing not to be offended. He pulled the old power unit from the truck with Marlowe's help. It hit the ground like a dropped safe. You get the core in, he said. I get power to you and keep the rift from turning into a shooting gallery. Dane, she said. He looked up. Do not let them make you choose for Tavik and Ara. Make them choose in front of what is true. He nodded. You too. Do not let Astron make your record more important than your reason for keeping one. It could have sounded cruel. It did not. It sounded like trust. For one quiet minute before they split, the shelter fell into the kind of silence that comes when every plan is too dangerous to admire. Marlowe checked the rig outside. Halen packed the core module with hands that still trembled. Dane found Seryn by the hatch, fastening the seal case to her belt because she needed both hands free in the tunnels. You should not have to walk into that basin, he said. Because I am injured? Because it will hurt you more. Those are not the same reason. He rubbed dust from the back of his neck. I know. I'm trying not to sound like an idiot. You are doing better than average. High praise from a soon-to-be suspended judge. Not suspended yet, right? Future suspended judge. She looked at him then, serious enough to strip the joke down to what was under it. Dane, I need you to understand something. If I use Halen's core to lock the anchors, I'm not being forced by guilt. I am choosing it because the living matter more than the perfect record. I understand. Do you? He did. That was what scared him. Edo. And if I break the bridge, I am not doing it because you need saving. I am doing it because the people at the rift need time, and because I helped make the path that put those anchors there. Seryn nodded slowly. Then neither of us is paying the other's debt. No, we are paying our own in the same direction. There is nothing soft about the words, yet they felt more intimate than comfort. Dane wanted to touch her face, to wipe away the dried blood near her temple, to ask for a promise neither of them could honestly give. Instead, he held out one of Marlowe's small emergency beacons. Short range only, he said. Black Line cannot track it unless they're already close. If you get pinned, hit it twice. She took it. And if you get pinned, I will complain loudly. People come to stop that. She tucked the beacon inside her coat. Then, with careful intent, she touched his wrist. Not long. Long enough. Complain loudly then, she said. They left separately. The low rift was already filling with dust and anger when Dane arrived. Tavik's crews held the north shelf. Ara's people lined the south cut. Between them, the old marker field lay cracked and empty. A temporary water pipe crossed the lower stones like a vein exposed to daylight. Dane drove straight between the first two barricades. Rifles rose. Whitlock, Tavik shouted, "Get out of the way." "I keep trying," Dane called back, stepping from the truck. "The way keeps putting fools in it." Ara pointed toward the north shelf. "He brought you here to stall us." "Black Line brought you here," Dane said. "Both of you." Same lie, different wrapper. No one lowered a weapon. The ground chose that moment to speak. A shelf cracked under one of Ara's carriers. The rear wheels dropped. The vehicle slid toward the lower cut with 4 people inside. Dane ran. He did not ask whose side they were on. He threw a line from his truck to the carrier frame, locked the winch, and shouted for Tavik's nearest crew to anchor the cable. They hesitated. "If that carrier falls," Dane yelled, "it takes your pipe with it. Then everyone gets thirsty in perfect fairness." Tavik swore and waved his people forward. Ara's crew braced from the other side. The winch strained. The cable sang. Marlowe arrived with the rescue rig and fired 2 flares into the dust, marking an evacuation lane. Together, people who had been ready to shoot pulled the carrier back from the edge. It did not end the standoff, but it cracked it. Karras did not send all his people to the rift. 2 guards intercepted Seryn and Halen 1 level above the core, where the tunnel widened into an equipment bay full of hanging cables. They ordered Seryn to surrender the seal case. Their tone was professional, almost bored, the tone of people who believed the structure of the world had already chosen their side. Seryn stood with one shoulder against the wall to hide how badly the pulses were affecting her balance. This facility is under emergency review. Step aside. Your access is suspended by Corporate Safety Authority. Corporate Safety Authority does not outrank active life preservation law. One guard raised a stun baton. Halen flinched back. Seryn moved first. She snapped the seal case open, not to retrieve a document, but to release a burst of bright marking foam used for evidence tags. The foam hit the guard's visor and hardened opaque. Halen, startled into courage, swung a coil spanner at the second guard's wrist. The baton clattered away. Seryn did not strike again. She shoved the blinded guard into an emergency shower alcove and triggered the lock with her seal wand, trapping him behind a transparent safety door. The other guard slipped on the foam and fell hard enough to lose interest in heroics. Halen stared at the mess. I did not know evidence supplies could do that. Seryn took one careful breath. Evidence often sticks to people who underestimate it. The joke cost her. She pressed a hand to her temple and kept walking before Halen could ask whether she was all right. The answer was no, and the answer did not change the route. Beneath the anchor basin, Seryn and Halen crawled through a maintenance tunnel that smelled of hot stone and old coolant. The walls trembled with each pulse. Blackline drones swept the main access shafts, so they moved through service passages barely wide enough for Halen's toolcase. At the first security door, Halen entered his code. The panel flashed red. Revoked, he whispered. Seryn placed her palm beside the panel. Are there life signs beyond this door? There should be maintenance chambers. Empty. Should be is not enough. She drew her seal wand and triggered a judicial emergency inquiry. The system hesitated, trapped between Astron's lockout and the old public safety rules. Ravikhar Border Safety Code requires an egress path for any living worker in an active seismic zone. Your code establishes you as a worker. My seal establishes the zone. Open. For a second, nothing happened. Then the door groaned aside. Halen stared. I thought law only stopped people. Seryn stepped through. Good law stops doors too. The deeper they went, the worse the pulses became. Seryn's vision blurred at the edges. The ridges at her temples felt as if hot wire had been threaded through them. Metal walls threw echoes back at her until direction became pain. A drone dropped from a ceiling rail. Halen froze. Seryn grabbed his sleeve and pulled him into a recess as the stun beam cut past. She drew the seal wand, not a weapon, but heavy enough, and struck the drone's sensor as it passed. It spun into the wall. Halen stared again. Judicial equipment, she said, breathing hard, is more durable than it looks. At the core chamber, Blackline had sealed the main console behind a magnetic gate. Seryn could see the truss pattern through it. Columns of black alloy descending into the planet, each one pulsing with restrained force. They were not machines placed on Ravikhar. They looked like needles holding the planet in place for someone else's profit. Halen opened the tool case. The core module inside was small, dull, and ugly. Once inserted, it will start synchronizing, he said. After that, we either lock during the phase window or the module burns. How long? Hard to know with the interference. Maybe 9 minutes after phase onset. Maybe less. Seryn looked at the gate. Open it. It will mark my code. Yes. They will find me. Yes. Halen's hands shook. Then he entered his old engineer code manually, not through the network. The magnetic gate opened the width of one hand, then two. Seryn slid through first. At the low rift, Karasdavan arrived with 3 Blackline vehicles and a comm voice broadcast over every channel. For your safety, all civilians will disarm and submit to security relocation. Failure to comply will be treated as hostile action. He means trespassing on your own homes, Dane muttered. Tabak heard him. And what do you mean, Whitlock? Dane looked at the old man, then at Aura, who stood beside the rescued carrier with mud to her knees. I mean, the ground is going to drop under this rift, and Blackline knows it. I mean, both of you got messages, time to put you here. I mean, if you keep aiming at each other, you make their report easy to write. Aura's face tightened. Prove it. The lower pipe burst before he could answer. Water sprayed across the cut, then vanished into a crack opening under it. The shelf where Tavik's people stood jerked down a foot. Proof did not persuade. Survival did. Dane and Marlowe moved crews into action. North side anchored lines. South side opened shelter gates. Ara ordered her people to release a temporary valve, sending clean reserve water toward Tavik's dry side, so his people would leave the shelf without thinking they were surrendering. Tavik snarled at the humiliation, then saw a child stumble near the edge and ordered his crew to move. The pull cycle was starting early. Dane's wristcom hissed. Seryn's voice came through broken and tight. We are at the core. Need external power. The internal feed is locked. Dane's first attempt to reach the relay failed. Blackline had set a portable barrier across the bridge mouth. A squat machine with anchor teeth drilled into the stone. It was meant to stop vehicles, not people, which told Dane they expected him to be practical and therefore predictable. He left the truck behind a ridge, crawled under the barrier with a cable clamp between his teeth, and reached the control box from below. The box required a security key. Dane did not have one. He did have a cracked sensor plate from his damaged mirror, a strip of copper from the winch housing, and the bad habit of fixing things that were supposed to be sealed. It took him 3 tries to short the release motor. On the second try, the barrier shocked his hand so hard his arm went numb to the elbow. You all right? Marlowe called over the comm. Dane flexed fingers he could barely feel. My hand has chosen early retirement. The rest of me is negotiating. The third try worked. The barrier teeth released. He sprinted back as Blackline's spotlights swung toward the bridge. By the time the first stun round cracked against stone, he had the truck moving again. The delay cost him minutes he did not have, and it made the later choice harsher. There would be no time to set a neat relay. Whatever he built at the bridge would be ugly, fast, and dangerous. Dane looked across the rift to the relay tower beyond the stone bridge. The bridge was a narrow spine of rock, cracked but still standing. If he drove the power unit across, he could connect to the relay. If he overloaded the bridge and dropped the cable down through the conductive stone, he could feed the basin directly. But once the bridge broke, the upper road was gone. Marlowe saw where he was looking. No, I have not said anything. Your face said something stupid. My face is an independent contractor. Dunna. Dane loaded the power unit onto the rear lift. Keep the evacuation lane open. Seryn's voice returned. Dane, report. He drove toward the bridge. Good news. I found your outlet. Your tone suggests bad news. The outlet is on the far side of a bridge that hates me. There was a pause full of static and understanding. If you cross and destroy it, you may not have a return route. That is the bad news, yes. I'm not ordering you to do that. I know. The choice must be yours. He stopped at the bridge mouth. Dust rolled off the edge into the widening cut. Across the rift, Blackline vehicles shifted to block him. Seryn, he said, you are choosing to burn the data that could save your career. Yes. Then I can ruin a bridge. That comparison is legally poor. I'm emotionally excellent. Her breath hitched, not quite a laugh. Then be careful, Dane. I plan to be reckless with care. He drove. The bridge shook under the truck. Blackline fired stun rounds into the stone ahead, trying to spook him into stopping. Dane did not. He hit the far side, dropped the power unit, and slammed the truck sideways behind a rock spur. The bridge cracked behind him, but stayed up. For now. He dragged the cable to the relay access. It was locked with a Blackline plate. He did not have time to open it cleanly. He used the truck's cutter to shear one hinge, then jammed a pry bar into the gap and threw his weight against it. The plate gave. Sparks snapped at his gloves. Marlowe, he called. When I say now, pull the bridge pins. You want me to drop the bridge you are standing beside? Near. Not on. I am particular. I hate your plans. That is how you know they are mine. At the relay, the first surge from the power unit nearly killed the feed. The old box had held steady in Marlowe's shed for years, but it had never been asked to argue with a planetary mining system. The needle on its load meter kicked into the red. Dane smelled insulation heating and knew he had seconds before the unit tripped itself to save its own antique heart. He yanked open the side panel and saw the regulator shaking loose. His right hand still tingled from the barrier shock, so he worked left-handed wedging the regulator with a broken tire lever and a strip of belt from the passenger harness. It was exactly the kind of repair no inspector would approve, and every Frontier mechanic would understand. Power is unstable, Halen warned through the comm. If it drops during the lock, the anchors may rebound. Tell the anchors to appreciate vintage equipment, Dane said through clenched teeth. A black line guard appeared on the ridge above him and aimed a stun rifle at the power unit. Dane did not have time to fight. He grabbed a handful of dust and threw it into the relay sparks. The mineral dust flashed bright, not explosive, just blinding. The guard fired wide. Dane ducked behind the unit and kicked the truck's loose door panel down the slope. It crashed, loudly enough to draw 2 more shots away from the cable. Dane, Seryn said, voice strained, your heart rate is very loud over the channel. That is because it is doing motivational work. Do not let it stop. That is my favorite plan so far. The regulator steadied. Not enough to be safe. Enough to be used. In the core chamber, the truss columns began to brighten. Halen inserted the core module. Seryn placed both hands on the console, ignoring the heat of the metal. The vibration rose through the floor into her bones. It was not sound. It was pressure shaped like rhythm. It pushed through her skull until tears blurred her sight. Each truss had its own beat. The phase window would open when those beats crossed, and for a few seconds, became one. A drone entered the chamber behind them. Halen shouted. Seryn did not turn. If she broke contact, she would lose the pattern. Halen swung his tool case and knocked the drone off course. It hit the console edge and spun, still active. Seryn, Dane's voice crackled. Power ready. Not yet. I love hearing that while being shot at. The drone emitted a piercing interference tone. The chamber became pain. Seryn's sense of the trusses scattered. She heard too many echoes. The phase pattern blurred. I cannot isolate it, she said. Tell me what you need. She tried to breathe. A clean reference. The metal is reflecting the pulse. Dane was outside, one hand on the live cable, one boot braced against stone. The truck frame vibrated against his back. Through the soles of his boots, he felt the rift answer the basin. Not with Seryn's precision. With the ugly honesty of a machine trying to tear a place apart. The bridge is humming in threes, he said. Low, low, high. Then a gap. The truck frame hits after the high. The cable jumps before the gap. Seryn closed her eyes. Low, low, high. Gap. The biological pain in her skull met Dane's rough description and found shape. Again, she whispered. Low, low, high. Gap. The stone under me drops on the second low. The truss is crossed. Now, Seryn said. Dane slammed the feed lever down. Now, Marlowe. Across the rift, Marlowe's crew pulled the bridge pins with the rescue rig. The cracked stone bridge collapsed in a controlled roar, dragging the cable into direct contact with the conductive seam below. The power unit screamed. The relay flared white. In the anchor basin, Seryn drove the judicial override through the core module at the exact moment Halen confirmed phase lock. The truss lights snapped from white to blue, then died one by one. The planet did not go quiet. It kicked. The low rift buckled. Dane was thrown against the truck. Dust swallowed everything. For several seconds there was no up, no road, no sound except stone breaking like thunder into blankets. Then came voices. Marlowe shouting. Tavik coughing. Ara calling for her people. Dane forced himself upright. His shoulder burned. His truck sat at an angle, rear wheels over empty air, held by the cable he had meant to sacrifice. Dane, Seryn's voice came through the comm, thin and damaged. Answer. He coughed dust. I would like to file a complaint about your planet. The breath she released was almost a sob, but she turned it into a command. Get out of the truck. Working on that. The rift had split the standoff into islands. Tavik's North crew was trapped near a falling shelf. Ara's rescued carrier blocked the only clear descent. Dane looked for Blackline and saw their vehicles reversing, abandoning positions before the dust even cleared. Karras was retreating because the fight had not happened. His report was dying. Dane kicked out the damaged door and slid down the tilted hood. Marlowe threw him a line. Together they pulled the first group across a gap, then the second. Tavik reached the safe side and immediately turned toward Ara's trapped people. For one long second, old hatred wrestled with new fact. Then Tavik pointed his cane. Pull them first. Their shelf is going. Ara heard. Her face changed. Not softened. Changed. Open the reserve valve. She ordered her aide. North tanks first. They cannot move the old people without water. No speech could have done what that moment did. The two communities did not forgive each other. They simply stopped being able to pretend the other side was the only enemy. By the time Seryn emerged from the anchor basin, supported by Halen but walking on her own, the worst of the collapse had passed. Dust coated her hair and face. Blood marked both sensory ridges. She looked as if standing cost her more than she had left. Dane crossed the uneven ground toward her. He stopped a pace away, close enough to catch her if she chose to fall, not close enough to decide for her. She noticed. Her tired eyes warmed. You dropped the bridge, she said. It had structural issues. You were on it. That was one of the issues. She reached out, and this time he did not hesitate to take her hand. Karastavin tried once more to regain control. He stood near a black-line carrier, coat immaculate despite the dust, and projected his voice over a field speaker. All parties will stand down. This site remains under private stabilization authority pending corporate review. Seryn released Dane's hand and stepped forward. She did not climb onto a vehicle. She did not ask for a crowd. The people close enough to hear were the ones who had nearly died. That was enough. She raised the seal wand. Her voice was hoarse but clear. Emergency field judgment. All prior boundary claims within the active displacement zone of the shatter line are temporarily suspended. Greywater Reach is under survival protection. Asteron Works and Blackline Guard are barred from access, pending independent review. Land use will be remeasured by water access, ground stability, residence history, and documented harm. This order is sealed by live field record, water samples, marker displacement, engineer testimony, and a locked state of deep anchor project. Kara smiled thinly. You have exceeded your authority. Yes, Seryn said. The single word hit harder than a denial. And I have recorded why. Karis looked toward Tavik, then Ara, searching for the fight he had arranged. Tavik's people were carrying Ara's injured across a plank. Ara's aides were opening water reserves for Tavik's elders. Marlowe's rescue team had Halen's tool case sealed in a witness crate. Dane stood beside Seryn with a pry bar in one hand and a shoulder that would bruise black by morning. Karis had weapons. He no longer had a story. Blackline withdrew. Before sunset, after Blackline withdrew, the first night was not peaceful. It was work. People slept in turns beside open cracks because the ground still clicked and settled. Marlowe's crew marked unsafe shelves with glow paint. Ara's aides boiled water in dented pots. Tavik's oldest workers repaired a pump with parts taken from two ruined carriers. Dane moved from one problem to another until his injured shoulder stiffened and Marlowe threatened to tie him to a chair. Seryn worked too, though every step showed the cost of the basin. She recorded names of the missing, marked equipment Blackline had abandoned, and sealed Halen's testimony in 3 partial copies because one clean record no longer existed. When her hand shook too much to hold the seal wand, Dane silently held the light for her. He did not tell her to stop. She did not pretend she did not need the light. Near dawn, they stood beside the broken bridge. The gap was wide and dark. The cable still stretched across it like a scar. Your route home is gone, Seryn said. I have had homes with worse access. That is not an answer. No, it is a dodge. I'm very tired. She nodded, accepting the honesty. Mine may be gone too. Not physically. Professionally. Dane looked across the rift. Do you regret it? She took a long breath. I regret that it was necessary. I do not regret choosing it. Same. Except my version has more bridge debris. The sun rose weakly through the dust. Neither reached for the other. They simply stood close, shoulder to shoulder, because after a night of collapse and orders and consequence, quiet proximity was the only confession either of them had strength to make. The consequences arrived faster than rain, and Ravikhar almost never got rain. Seryn received her suspension notice while seated on the tailgate of Marlowe's rescue rig, drinking water with both hands because they shook if she used one. The notice accused her of exceeding precedent, corrupting primary evidence, and issuing survival protection before central approval. She read it once and folded the projection closed. Dane's notice came 10 minutes later. Guide license revoked pending review. Unauthorized breach of security. Corridor. Destruction of protected infrastructure. Improper use of rescue power equipment. He stared at the list. Improper? That box has never been used properly in its life. Marlowe, wrapping Dane's shoulder, snorted. You are welcome. Halen was taken into protected custody by an independent relief crew Seryn managed to contact before her access was fully cut. He did not look free, but he looked alive. That counted for more than it had that morning. Tavik came to Dane near the broken rift. The old man's cane sank slightly in the dust. Some of my people still think you betrayed us, Tavik said. Dane nodded. They may be right, depending on which version of us they wanted me to protect. Tavik looked toward Ara's camp, where North and South workers were laying a temporary water pipe together under Marlowe's direction. I wanted the land to hold still long enough for the old promises to mean something. So did everyone. Ara joined them, tired and streaked with mineral dust. The land did not hold still. The promises will have to move without breaking. Seryn, hearing that, looked up. That is close to law. Ara gave her a wary glance. Is that an insult? No, a warning. Law is harder to repair than pipe. Dane flexed his sore shoulder. Pipe complains less. You have not met our pipe, Tavik said. For the first time, all four of them almost laughed. When the first sensor mast was raised weeks later, no one cheered. That would have made the moment too simple. Tavik argued that the mast stood 2 yards too far south, and Ara argued that the water gauge faced the wrong channel. Marlowe told both of them that if they wanted the mast moved, they could lift it themselves with their repaired backs and imaginary crane. Seryn listened, then asked the children who carried water between camps where they could see the warning light from the farthest distance. The children chose a position neither adult had suggested. Dane drove the mast there, and for once nobody had a better argument than visibility. That became the pattern. The new order was not clean. It was practical, stubborn, and watched by people who had learned what happened when distant systems made perfect. Maps of places they did not have to sleep in. Seryn's temporary judgment did not solve every ownership claim. It did something harder. It forced every claim to account for water, ground, history, and harm at the same time. Dane watched her work without the mantle and realized she had not become less of judge. She had become harder to dismiss as one. The new mass also changed how people spoke. Before, every argument began with who owned the land. Now, many began with whether the amber light had blinked at dawn, whether the water gauge had dropped, whether the southern culvert should be cleared before the northern pump. It was not peace in the way stories like to sell peace. It was maintenance. It was shared inconvenience, which on the frontier could become a stronger treaty than ceremony. Dane found that strange comfort. He had spent years being useful by moving through places other people could not. Now he was useful by teaching others how to read them. He showed Ara's younger crews how to spot dust flowing against the wind. He taught Tavik's old well hand how to hear a hollow shelf by tapping it with a pipe wrench. He made bad jokes through all of it, partly because the work was hard and partly because people listened better when they were trying not to laugh. Seryn built the other half. She translated field signs into records simple enough for the center to receive and hard enough for Asteron to twist. She refused to call the new system temporary, even when officials asked for the word. Temporary things were easy to ignore. Living things were harder. So she called the masts living markers, and the phrase spread because it felt true to people who had watched dead markers lie. One evening, Tavik and Ara argued over the name of a shared repair crew for nearly an hour. Dane expected Seryn to end it. Instead, she let them argue until both were too annoyed to be ceremonial. Then she suggested no name at all until the crew survived its first storm. Tavik grumbled that this was sensible. Ara said sensible ideas were suspicious but acceptable. Dane leaned close to Seryn and whispered that she had just weaponized patience. She replied that she had learned from the local wildlife. Weeks later, Greywater Reach still looked wounded. The old casket-shaped markers had not been removed. Seryn had insisted they remain, not as authority, but as evidence of authority's failure. Beside them stood new masts no taller than a person, each one fitted with ground sensors, water gauges, and a simple warning light that any child could read. Green meant stable enough. Amber meant measure again. Red meant move now and argue later. Marlowe ran the new rescue shed from a patched roof near the rebuilt channel. Tavik and Ara hated the committee table, but used it anyway, mostly because it was placed beside the water valves and nobody could argue theory while listening to pipes rattle. Dane's truck had been repaired with parts from 3 vehicles, 1 broken gate, and something Marlowe refused to identify. It no longer had an official guide beacon. People still came to him when they needed to cross the shatter line. Seryn no longer wore the formal white field mantle of a traveling judge. Her suspension remained under review, which was a polite way of saying the center hoped the frontier would stop needing her before it had to admit she had been right. She wore a plain dark coat now, with the seal wand tucked inside like any other tool. They stood together at the edge of a new marker line while the evening wind moved dust across the basin. Dane watched his sensor mast blink green. You know, I always thought unemployment would involve more sitting. Seryn looked at the work crews hauling pipe behind them. By legal definition, you are not unemployed. That's so. You are performing essential labor outside every reasonable compensation structure. That sounds worse. It is more accurate. He glanced at her. And you? I am suspended from formal judgment. But people keep asking you to decide things. People are inconvenient that way. Dunne smiled. The wind shifted, carrying the smell of wet stone from the repaired channel. It was not victory. Not clean, not easy, not finished. Astron Works would fight. The center would delay. The ground would move again someday, because Ravikhar had never promised anyone stillness. Seryn placed her hand on the nearest marker mast. After a moment she nodded. Stable, she said. Your bones say so? My bones suggest caution. They always do. Smart bones. She looked at him, and the softness in her expression was not weakness. It was choice. You stayed. So did you. I had a phasing network to monitor. I had a terrible truck to offend. Dunne. He let the joke fade before it could hide the truth. I stayed because the first honest map of this place is not finished yet. And because building it with you seems less foolish than most things I've done. Seryn took that in with the seriousness she gave to every word that mattered. Then she reached for his hand, not as a rescue, not as a reward, but as a decision made in open air. Then we should make it a difficult map to falsify, she said. He laced his fingers with hers. Judge, that may be the most romantic threat I have ever heard. It was not a threat. Give it time. The marker light stayed green. Behind them, 2 communities argued over pipe angles, ration schedules, and sensor placement instead of burial counts and rifle lines. Ahead, the shatter line stretched under the bruised Ravikhar sky, still dangerous, still restless, but no longer silent. Dane and Seryn walked toward the work crews together, listening to the ground beneath their feet and to each other, because both had learned that survival on a moving frontier required more than a line on a map. It required someone willing to step onto the line when it broke, and someone willing to redraw it around the living. On Ravikhar, the ground never truly became still. It kept shifting in small ways under the roads, beneath the water lines, around the new living markers that Tavik and Ara now checked together each morning. But for the first time in a long while, the people of Greywater Reach were not listening to the land alone. Dane Whitlock still drove the broken roads, even without the license that once made him official. Seryn Vaal still answered when people asked for judgment, even without the robe that once made others obey. Neither of them had walked away with everything they lost, but they had kept the one thing the border had almost stolen from. Everyone, the right to choose what kind of people they would become when the ground beneath them started to break. And maybe that was why, when Dane looked at Seryn beside the new markers, he did not see a fallen judge. She did not see a ruined guide. They saw 2 people who had crossed a dying border, paid the price for telling the truth, and found something worth building on the other side. Not perfect law, not perfect safety, just a place where no one had to stand alone when the world moved under their feet. If this story stayed with you, please give a like. It helps more than you know. And if you enjoy science fiction stories about humans, alien worlds, courage, sacrifice, and the strange ways people learn to trust each other, please subscribe to the channel. Share this story with someone who loves a good science fiction adventure. Thank you for listening until the end. I hope Dane and Seryn's journey reminded you that sometimes the strongest borders are not the ones drawn on a map, but the ones we choose to cross for someone else.